color swatch options, and it's the Pretty Privilege collection. Between 5 and 10,000 Linda. We'll see how this all works, but maybe I could provide some things for DJs, like a DJ list. This is going to be the goth section here of the wedding menu. Like people who like burner, things items. I mean, we start with things before you guys can get me up here. And of course, you can change your win lights, and it looks really badass here. Like, I think I'm really proud of this. I do like food and stuff. If people want kind of like a different service, but I need to try it with larger groups. Then we have like this cake stand. You can take pictures here. Pretty. We have champagne flower, and then we have two of the same cakes here because one of the cakes you actually just sit on, and you can take pictures, right? It's like you feed yourself. So play. That's cute. Let's let it kind of cycle through. It's not like sync where you need like 90 seconds. So the mouth dance is kind of all the same. It's like the dance side. It's not exactly sexy because it's not fluid enough. One second. Let me just say hi. Trash. Take out the trash. Let's do that. And then let's do the gotcha situation. And then we were trying to make like a chat GPT kind of thing. I saw it. I'm gonna show you guys. I saw that before then and I loved it. And I didn't buy it. I might buy it now, but I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. But Matt was like, don't buy it. bits were 4,000. Hold on one second, guys. The non-gotcha sales were $4,680, and that was a lot of my 3 day setup. I don't know if I sold a building or something. I'm not really sure. It doesn't really look like it. It just looks like all my like knickknacks that I sold, like maybe birds, maybe definitely a lot of laundry items, maybe yard names, things like that. I really put advertisement on it, like the thousands of gotchas. Like I have probably like 1,000, 2,000, maybe 3,000, definitely 3,000 on my marketplace, close to that. And I have a bunch in my inventory I haven't posted. But there are people who have like 14,000 and 20,000. I would think that they want to be compensated for that. Even if it's like 25 lenders and more than like 50, maybe it's the value of something. And I think that would be a lot of the thing for the new ones. So maybe that's why they're not able to provide the house that handle. join any events or anything like that. So let's get into it right now. This is a new house, so I don't know where to show